this is the Vivo X100 Ultra. And as of now, according to our videos, this is the most high-end camera phone on the market. And this is the one and only iPhone 15 Pro Max. And in this video, friends, we're going to compare the photo and video capabilities of these two top camera phones on the market. Alright, friends, let's get started.
Hey friends, this video was translated using a neural network, so the sound quality isn't the best. If you want to listen to the original sound from a smartphone and hear the audio recording test, just follow the link in the description to our original video.
Both smartphones are currently charged to 100%, the Vivo X100 Ultra and the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Well, the iPhone 15 Pro Max is at 98%, I just couldn't get it to charge all the way to 100. But we'll take that into account at the end, let's give it a little allowance. On the iPhone, the front camera is 12 megapixels with an f1.9 aperture, while on the Vivo it's a whopping 50 megapixels, but with an f2.5 aperture.
Let's see who can handle the video better.
Alright, friends, our first test is the iPhone 15 Pro Max, shooting in 4K at 60 frames per second. And this is the Vivo X100 Ultra shooting in 4K at 60 frames per second. Both smartphones can easily record 4K at 60 frames per second using the front camera. We're in vertical shooting mode here. And then we'll see which smartphone handles it better. Most Film Park is a very beautiful place. The location is awesome. Here, the sun is already shining really strongly. So how do the smartphones handle shooting against the sun? At first glance, the image quality from both front cameras looks pretty decent. When it comes to color, it's a matter of personal preference. The iPhone has more natural colors, while the Vivo's image is more saturated and vibrant. But the dynamic range is clearly better on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. There are fewer blown-out highlights on the shirt, and you can see more detail in the shadows. The same goes for the grass and trees. The iPhone also immediately stands out with smoother stabilization, but we'll test that more later. Once again, the iPhone handles backlighting better. At Vivo, the sky is overexposed and the camera has a lot of glare, and this is what the cinematic effect looks like. So, the iPhone 15 Pro Max can shoot 4K at 30 frames per second in this mode, but the Vivo X100 Ultra only does Full HD at 30 frames per second. There you go, and that's how the picture looks for us. And if you shoot like this, against the light, against the sun, now the sun just went behind a cloud in the background, but you can see that the iPhone handles it really well. The dynamic range is actually very good, and with it, everything is really clear. You can see the blue sky.
But the Vivo doesn't show the sky as well.
Portrait mode on the Vivo is very jittery, especially noticeable when rotating the camera and with backlighting. Once again, the 15 Pro Max performs better. Alright, now we're shooting in horizontal mode on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, 4K at 60 frames per second.
And the Vivo X100 Ultra does 4K at 60 frames per second on the front camera.
Here, the sun is shining directly into the camera. There you go. But I think both smartphones are actually handling it really well. And you can even see the blue sky over there if you look like this. In landscape mode, the situation remains the same. The iPhone definitely wins in terms of dynamic range, handling backlighting, and stabilization.
Let's jog a little.
While running, the shaking on the Vivo became even more noticeable. And now in the cinematic mode on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, I set the blur to 2.8, because when we shot in vertical mode, the blur was 4.5. So right now, the blur is set to 2.8 on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. The aperture is f2.8 on the Vivo X100 Ultra. And here you can see how it blurs the background. But to me, it seems like the iPhone blurs the background a lot more, definitely more than the Vivo does. Apple and Samsung can shoot cinematic mode in 4K at 30 frames per second with the front camera. While unfortunately, Chinese brands can't do that. And on the Vivo, we only get Full HD at 30 frames per second. This way, it's a bit better. But when we shoot like this, so right now, I'm in the shade, which is a really tough condition, and there's a lot of light behind me. The background behind is very well lit. So, with such a big difference, do the cameras handle the image well? There's nothing more to add about portrait mode compared to what was said earlier. Once again, the iPhone clearly does a better job in every aspect. Portrait shooting, 4K at 30 frames per second on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and Full HD at 30 frames per second on the Vivo X100 Ultra. And here you can see, as we walk like this, how the background gets blurred. Right?
You can see that on the iPhone. Anya's face is not in focus, but on the Vivo it looks like both faces are in focus.
Here, the iPhone basically didn't apply any blur, even though it appeared on the smartphone's screen. The iPhone's cinematic mode is actually set up in a really strange way. You have to adjust the background blur every single time. In this regard, Vivo's portrait mode works better and is more straightforward, and the blur turns on right away. But to be fair, that's only with 2 people. In the shot, Vivo couldn't handle it and blurred out my wife. But overall, when it comes to the front camera in video mode, the 15 Pro Max is definitely the winner. But we'll see who comes out on top in the other tests. Place your bets. The iPhone 15 Pro Max has a 12-megapixel ultra-wide camera, a 48-megapixel main camera, and a 12-megapixel telephoto lens. The Vivo X100 Ultra, on the other hand, features a 50-megapixel ultra-wide and main camera and a telephoto lens with a whopping 200 megapixels. Let's test them. 4K at 60 frames per second. Main camera module, ultra-wide-angle lens. Let's see which smartphone handles this kind of shooting better. On the iPhone 15 Pro Max, we have the ultra-wide camera at 0.5x. On the Vivo X100 Ultra, we have an ultra-wide lens at 0.6x, so it's a bit wider. In theory, the iPhone should have a slightly longer focal length. There you go. Well, let's see how it actually looks. Again, let's listen carefully to how both smartphones record sound, because at this very moment, there's wind blowing and a noisy, busy road nearby. In the last test, when we compared the Vivo X100 Ultra and the Samsung S24 Ultra, the Vivo performed really well in terms of audio recording, but the iPhone doesn't always deliver great audio recording.
Detail is noticeably higher on the iPhone.
Skin, hair, and the greenery in the background all look sharper. In terms of color, once again, the iPhone's image is a bit paler and darker, but the skin tone is more yellowish. Vivo does a better job here. Now, I think we'll go for a little run. Let's go! When running, both smartphones performed well. The image is stable, the background doesn't shake, everything's in order. I turned the camera to the front, and here the difference in quality in favor of the 15 Pro Max is even more noticeable. Plus, it renders the sky better. But when it comes to stabilization, Vivo seemed a bit smoother to me here. The iPhone shows more noticeable small jitters. 1x lens on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, 4K at 60 frames per second. The Vivo X100 Ultra also shoots in 4K at 60 frames per second. And the only thing is, on the iPhone, the footage is recorded in HDR right away. The Vivo X100 Ultra also has Dolby Vision. And actually, you can see on it where you can enable Dolby Vision, in which mode it works, and in which mode it doesn't. On the iPhone, with the 15 Pro Max, unfortunately, it's a different situation. Basically, you can just enable HDR in the menu and that's it. But it's unclear in which modes it works and in which it doesn't. No complaints about the main camera. Both smartphones deliver an excellent, beautiful, and sharp image. Both cameras are steady when it comes to stabilization as well.
Let's shoot everything around.
Here, the difference in color reproduction is more noticeable. The Vivo image is warmer, while the iPhone's is cooler and more natural. But here, both smartphones don't handle stabilization very well. The 15 Pro Max shakes, and the Vivo X100 Ultra shows noticeable blur. And when running, both cameras perform even worse. And all I did was turn into a park where there's just a little less light, and already the smartphones can't handle stabilization. So what will happen in the dark? I'm trying to shoot with 2x zoom. The iPhone holds a bit steadier, and its image doesn't have any blur, unlike its competitor. But when running, both just completely fall apart. It's just a nightmare. In short, I don't recommend using 2x zoom for shooting while moving.
Friends, so I came here specifically because this is a very noisy road. There are 3 lanes of traffic going one way and 3 lanes going the other way. And how do these microphones even record sound? I'm walking down this great road, and it's going to be really interesting to listen how well our microphones did. Here, the conditions are extremely difficult. I mean, this is a seriously intense road. Unfortunately, there is no way to choose microphone direction on either smartphone. So I guess the smartphones will just pick up all of this noise from the cars. The conditions are really tough. This road is no joke. Really, it's as bad as it can get for this test. And in addition to that, the wind also picked up. And now I'll activate the voice enhancement mode on the Vivo X100 Ultra. Voice enhancement is now active. Again, really interesting to hear how the Vivo records my voice with the voice isolation, while there are so many cars driving. And how does it record it without this effect? I'm going to turn off this mode now. And now it's off. Let's listen how it sounds now.
The sound on the iPhone turned out to be pretty good overall. Despite the noise, you can hear me quite clearly, but the microphone didn't handle the wind very well. On the Vivo, the sound is more compressed, but you can still hear me just fine. With voice enhancement on the Vivo, the sound gets even more compressed. And even though the voice does stand out, I wouldn't recommend using this mode. So far, when it comes to sound, my favorite is Samsung. You can check out any of our previous tests with Samsung and listen for yourself.
Okay guys, I've activated enhanced stabilization, and both smartphones are shooting in 2.8K at 60 frames per second.
This is the kind of stabilization that requires a lot of light, and in theory, it should work well. We're going to test that right now. The X100 Ultra is one of the best smartphones for this kind of shooting. When compared to Samsung, it performed really well. By the way, both smartphones are filming, the iPhone at 0.5x and the Vivo at 0.6x. Usually, I don't recommend turning on maximum stabilization on smartphones, but when it comes to the iPhone, I can say that it's actually a perfectly viable shooting option. The image is high quality, detailed, and the stabilization works excellently. With Vivo, the drop in quality is more noticeable, but overall it's still not bad compared to other Android phones. Even with the Samsung S24 Ultra, the result is definitely respectable. By the way, you can find our big battle between the flagship Samsung and the Vivo X100 Ultra at the link in the description. The showdown turned out to be really exciting. By the way, the Vivo smartphone itself shows that this Ultra, the super stabilization, only works in good lighting conditions. So, while the iPhone doesn't display any messages here, like whether you can shoot or not, Vivo clearly tells you, it's better to go somewhere with good lighting. That's when you can enable this super stabilization. As soon as I pointed at good lighting, it works just fine. As soon as I pointed at poor lighting, it immediately complains. That's an interesting little tip, huh? Both Vivo and iPhone are capable of shooting video in HDR. But with Vivo, it's a more modern version of this technology, Dolby Vision. Compared to standard video, HDR has a wider dynamic range, which means we can color grade the video more freely and recover blown-out highlights and dark areas in the frame. At least, in theory. But of course, a lot depends on the quality of the camera that's capturing the HDR. And this is what the picture looks like when you shoot on the Vivo X100 Ultra in Dolby Vision. And on the iPhone, the ultra-wide-angle lens only shoots in HDR on the iPhone. But the Vivo X100 Ultra shoots in Dolby Vision. This is how it looks filming yourself. Conditions are challenging. Strong sunlight comes through the clouds from behind. Vivo X100 Ultra ultra-wide lens. 4K at 60 frames per second, Dolby Vision. And the iPhone 15 Pro Max does 4K at 60 frames per second, HDR. With the iPhone, after color grading, you really do get a vibrant image with lush greens and a deep blue sky. But with the Vivo, you can't achieve the same result because the original footage quality is just too mediocre. And this is how the main lens works, the wide-angle lens of the Vivo X100 Ultra, 4K at 60 frames per second with Dolby Vision effect enabled. And the iPhone 15 Pro Max, HDR, 4K at 60 frames per second. HDR is activated. And now let's see which smartphone handles it better, how well you can actually see my face because the conditions are really tough. Behind me, the sun is shining on us. There you go. And in theory, if smartphones can really handle this kind of image, that would be super cool, of course.
Friends, this is what 8K 30 frames per second shooting looks like on Vivo.
4K at 30 frames per second on the iPhone 15 Pro Max.
So, can Vivo with its 8K video mode really beat the iPhone in terms of quality?
Is it worth shooting in 8K on the Vivo, or not? Or will the image look better on the iPhone? Honestly, it'll be really interesting to see, especially with me standing like this. The conditions are tough here, the sun is blazing hard. Can the smartphones handle it? Yes, unfortunately, it's not possible to shoot in 8K on the iPhone. But looking at the results, I really don't see any advantage for the Vivo. The iPhone's image doesn't lose out at all in terms of detail and sharpness. The only thing is, against the sun, the 15 Pro Max performed a bit worse, overexposing my face more. But at the same time, the sky in the background was more visible on it. While running, both smartphones delivered equally good results. But again, there was no noticeable advantage to 8K. I'm filming everything around me, and I like both images, with neither one having the upper hand. Let's run again, still no difference. Well, maybe the iPhone holds a bit steadier, and that's it.
And this is cinematic video mode while filming with the main camera. So we get 4K at 30 frames per second on both smartphones.
The blur effect is 2.8, so our aperture is at 2.8. That means, in theory, we should get a nice blur. Now, let's see how both smartphones perform. I'm walking a little bit ahead again, like this. Anya is a little bit in the background. And how does the camera see it? Does it pick it up or not? It'll be really interesting to watch later. I'm hiding my face again. And this is how it looks.
Is the camera focusing on me, or is it focusing on her?
In this test, the iPhone definitely performed better.
Anya was always in focus.
Even when she was some distance away from me, while the Vivo kept her blurry about 90% of the time. And only when I turned away did the X100 Ultra manage to get her face in focus. And of course, we couldn't skip doing a tracking shot for a full test of this mode. So far, the iPhone still hasn't had a worthy competitor when it comes to portrait video mode, and this time it only reaffirmed its leadership. Dynamic range, bokeh, stabilization, the 15 Pro Max looks better than its competitor in every aspect. Let's evaluate the camera's range and zoom quality. The ultra-wide on the iPhone is 0.5x, while on the Vivo it's 0.6x. Here, neither to the eye nor in the details is there any significant difference. Just like with 1x zoom, the results are very similar. Let's turn on 2x zoom. The result turned out to be more or less the same. For 3x digital zoom on the iPhone, you have to set it manually, while on the Vivo we use the optical 3.7x. The telephoto lens kicks in. And of course, here the X100 Ultra delivers a much better result. You can even read the small text, while on the iPhone everything turns into a blur. At 5x zoom, the iPhone once again uses optical zoom with the telephoto lens. On the Vivo, it's digital, and on the 15 Pro Max, the video looks a bit sharper and the colors are better preserved, especially the whites. At 10x zoom, the results are almost identical in quality, but the iPhone has noticeably less noise. 15x zoom is the maximum for the iPhone. Here, both images turned out to be basically identical. On the Vivo, we can zoom in up to 20x. The quality, of course, isn't the greatest, but the iPhone doesn't even have this level of zoom. We immediately tested 8K on the Vivo versus 4K on the iPhone. Here, the difference is actually noticeable right away. The X100 Ultra has higher detail and less noise. At 3x zoom, the X100 Ultra has less noise and the video looks a bit sharper. But at 5x zoom, it's the opposite. The iPhone's video is significantly sharper and more detailed. So overall, 8K on the Vivo might be relevant, but only if you're not zooming in. So, friends, of course, a huge advantage of the iPhone 15 Pro Max is that it can shoot in log format, in HDR, with all the lenses, at all zoom levels, even up to 15 times zoom, that is, at the maximum zoom. While the Vivo X100 Ultra can do logarithms, it can only shoot 1x and 2x. And that's it. Shooting in the log profile on smartphones is questionable and probably not very relevant. In this mode, we can shoot a desaturated image with a wider dynamic range than with standard video recording. The iPhone lets us shoot in log on all lenses and focal lengths. Vivo, on the other hand, only allows log shooting from the main camera at 1x and 2x. But with the kind of sensor even flagship smartphones have, it's unlikely we'll get anything worthwhile. In terms of quality, log profiles don't offer any advantage on either the iPhone or the Vivo. And honestly, shooting in log on smartphones is still something I personally don't really understand. For clarity, we also shot some log footage in the studio. You can judge for yourself whether it's worth using this kind of shooting or if there's really no point to it. And for comparison, I shot a log profile on our main studio camera, the Sony Alpha 7 RV. Here, you can see for yourself just how big the difference is between shooting like this on a smartphone and on a camera. The The iPhone lets us shoot at 120 and 240 frames per second, but unfortunately, only in full HD, while on the Vivo we can shoot 120 frames in 4K and 240 frames, also only in full HD. Of course, 4K looks more impressive, the detail is better here, and the image quality is higher. At 240 frames per second, both smartphones messed up. During editing, it turned out that the 15 Pro Max didn't actually have any 240 FPS at all. The maximum was 170 frames per second. We checked the file properties in Premiere using a separate plugin, 170 frames. The Vivo really does have 240 frames, but with the same slow motion effect, the 15 Pro Max drops frames. Apple, what's going on? And after a while, the Vivo started acting up and crashing out of the camera app. We had the same issue with it when we compared it to the S24 Ultra. And yes, guys, we took your advice and reset the camera, nothing helped. On the iPhone, the macro mode works with the main lens for both video and photos, while on the Vivo, it uses the telephoto lens. And personally, in my opinion, the result on the 15 Pro Max is of higher quality. On the iPhone 15 Pro Max, we can only shoot time-lapse in full HD, while on the Vivo, it's available in 4K. And of course, the time-lapse on the Vivo definitely wins over full HD in both detail and sharpness. Night has fallen here, and now we're going to test the photo and video capabilities of these two smartphones.
Okay, so right now we're filming in 4K at 30 frames per second. Pretty loud road up here. By the way, we also will be able to hear how the microphones sound as well. Again, we're using the front camera in 4K 30 FPS on both smartphones. But we do know that the front cameras are not the best choice to film in low light conditions. Here, the lighting is a bit better. There's more light. And I think the image should be a little bit better. We're filming in front of the beautiful Moscow city. And this is how it turns out. So when there's plenty of light, both smartphones do a pretty good job.
The video from both front cameras looks acceptable. We've seen much worse results in our tests, but overall, I still wouldn't recommend shooting in low light like this.
And now let's do a little run. Let's go.
In terms of stabilization, the iPhone performs quite well, but with the Vivo, the image shakes a lot.
Okay, let's continue shooting with cinematic mode on. And still, the iPhone says that it's too dark. And now I think we should do a little run. Although I think the picture would be really bad. Because even right now, the iPhone says there's not enough light. Even though there's a lot of light, but I can't imagine what it would look like while running.
In portrait mode, everything looks pretty normal. The phones handle background blur pretty well, keeping the focus on me even in these conditions. But once again, stabilization is definitely better on the 15 Pro Max. For the Vivo's front camera, this is clearly a weak point. And here we have shooting with an ultra-wide-angle lens, 4K at 30 FPS on smartphones.
And right now, we're getting back to the mall.
Let's see how these cameras actually perform. Ultra-wide lens. Turns out, there's actually not much light in Moscow City. I thought there would be a lot more. I like the ultra-wide camera more on the iPhone. It preserves all the details pretty well, even in extremely poor lighting. The overall image quality is solid, and the background doesn't jitter, unlike on the Vivo. When there's enough light, the foreground on the X100 Ultra looks just as good. But the background is still better preserved on the iPhone. Stabilization is also better maintained on the 15 Pro Max. The Vivo has more blur and jitter. I'm filming everything around me. Here, the image quality is pretty bad on both cameras. Illuminated signs and light sources wobble like jelly. The video gets blurry with almost every step. The quality is disappointing, except the iPhone has a bit less noise and slightly sharper detail. And when running, it's just a mess. And now shooting at 1x. By the way, the wind has really picked up here. It'll be very interesting to hear how our microphones record this. Right now, it's 1x 4K 30 FPS. But I feel like the wind is blowing so hard right now that both smartphones are going to record pretty badly. There you go. But as for the lighting, honestly, I think it's just fantastic. There's a lot of light here, a really bright sign. The lighting on me is good. And there really shouldn't be any problems with the lighting at all. At least, that's what I think. The quality from the main camera is very similar. Both images look good even in low light. Stabilization also worked almost identically, although on the Vivo, the image seems a bit steadier. Let's check it now. I turn the camera forward, and on the iPhone, the main camera's stabilization really is weaker. You can see jerks and blur. It's even more noticeable when running. Here, the Vivo definitely has a steadier image. I also shot a bit with 2x zoom, and here too, the jerks on the 15 Pro Max are much more noticeable. On the Vivo, it seems fine. The image is actually pretty good. I'd also point out here that the iPhone doesn't handle wind at all. And even though it has a wider frequency range than the Vivo, wind blowing into the microphone doesn't sound great. Vivo, while it does filter out wind noise, also suppresses the low and even mid frequencies. But as a result, the sound itself is cleaner. Both results are completely opposite. Which one do you like? Let me know in the comments.
Cinematic video mode with the background blur effect. 4K at 30 FPS on both smartphones. We're using the main camera. How is the sound? It's really noisy here. There are fans working. They're very loud. It really drowns out my voice.
Portrait video looks good on both smartphones, but I don't really like the yellowish tint on the iPhone's skin tones. But overall, the quality turned out to be quite decent. As for stabilization, the Vivo shakes a bit more here. Now let's see how both handle a nighttime pan shot. The iPhone lost focus a couple of times, but overall, the pan was smooth and beautiful. With the Vivo, although there was no loss of focus, the pan itself looks jerky, sometimes even very much so. And then there's the quality in terms of detail. The 15 Pro Max is noticeably better.
And now we're going to test the zoom range on our smartphones.
The ultra-wide works more or less the same, so let's move on right away. Vivo preserved the details a bit better with the main camera, but the difference is really minimal. The 2x zoom looks better on the iPhone. The detail is much better and there's significantly less noise. The 3.7x telephoto on the X100 Ultra and the 3x zoom on the iPhone. Here, the situation is the opposite. The first one definitely delivers a higher quality image. At 5x zoom, both competitors are on par again. Once more, there's no significant difference. It's the same situation at 10x zoom. Again, a similar result, just like at 15x. But with Vivo, you can still zoom in up to 20x. The quality is a bit worse than at 15x zoom, but props for having the option at all. When it comes to 8K, it's the same story as when shooting during the day. Only at 1x does Vivo have a slight advantage. But at all other focal lengths, 4K looks just as good. Here, the situation is similar to shooting in log mode during the day. I wouldn't recommend zooming. It's better to stick to the main camera without zooming in. For Vivo, low light conditions just don't work. The image turns out noisy. No matter how hard you try, you can't really recover the overexposed areas. And when you zoom in, it even starts to get jittery. But overall, in these conditions, it's not practical to shoot in a log profile. For the iPhone, compared to regular shooting, there's no advantage in these kinds of shots. It's the same story with Vivo. That wraps up the video tests. Let's move on to photos. Let's start with regular photos. Let's take a look at the color reproduction and overall image quality, and we'll begin with the ultra-wide lens. For the most part, Vivo's photos are more contrasty and warmer than the iPhone's. But there isn't a significant difference so far, and both cameras perform well. With the main camera, the situation is pretty much the same. On the Vivo, the photos are more colorful, while on the iPhone, the colors are closer to natural. But again, I like both options. At 2x zoom, it's the same story. With the X100 Ultra, the photos come out of the camera saturated and vibrant, ready to post on social media right away. The iPhone looks more natural and applies less processing. And here, honestly, it just comes down to your personal preference. I tried shooting at 5x, 10x, and 25x zoom. And the higher the zoom, the better the Vivo photos look compared to the iPhone. But we'll be testing the long-range capabilities of the cameras separately very soon. Let's take a selfie. With Vivo, the photos turn out a bit sharper and more detailed, but the algorithm smoothed the skin a lot, sometimes making it look very unnatural. Of course, that's a matter of taste. Some people might like that, but in portrait mode, the iPhone selfies really fell short. Even with good lighting, the quality turned out to be pretty mediocre. The level of detail is much lower compared to the Vivo selfie, and the colors are kind of dull too. Both smartphones have noticeable issues with hair and along the blur outline. The portrait photos from both smartphones are flawless. Everything looks very beautiful, and there are no significant issues with the blur boundary. The only difference is in color reproduction. With Vivo, the shots are generally brighter and the background shifts toward turquoise tones, with the colors being noticeably enhanced. The 15 Pro Max tries to keep the background looking natural. Its photos are more contrasty and warmer, but I personally prefer the results from Vivo. While we're still on the topic of portrait mode, I want to remind you that Vivo is the best camera phone for portrait photography and probably the top flagship for photos in 2024. You can find out more about why that is in my previous videos about this smartphone, but I'll briefly explain it here as well. There are dozens of modes, settings, features, simple and clear instructions and tips, a very user-friendly interface, AI features, and much more. Honestly, I don't think the iPhone stands a chance when it comes to photo mode.
Friends, we've come to the best vegan cafe in Moscow. Good food bowl. And now we're going to do our favorite spoon fork test. So, let's get started.
Let me remind you, we're doing this test to check how well the blur algorithms work on smartphones. And this is the real moment of truth. Both smartphones are the best in this test, since all the other smartphones have always failed it. So what can I say? Both handled it differently. The iPhone has smoother edges around the fork, but in one of the photos, it slightly blurred out a piece of pasta. The Vivo has slightly uneven edges around the fork, but it preserved the piece of pasta better. However, compared to the competition, this is simply an excellent result. Unfortunately, the iPhone doesn't have a food mode. We can only either take portrait shots of beautiful food, or just use the regular photo mode. Vivo, on the other hand, is made for people right away. First of all, it has a very beautiful portrait mode, like this one. You get a really beautiful photo. You can turn on photo mode, but it will suggest it's better to use the food mode. And with food mode, it instantly makes it look as beautiful as possible. My favorite mode is the landscape and architecture mode. And here, we can choose how we want to set the focus. The food photos look more appetizing to me on the Vivo, especially when I took close-up shots. The iPhone even showed some noise in certain areas, and overall, everything looks kind of washed out. Of course, the iPhone 15 Pro Max is great because we can take photos in RAW with the ultra-wide lens and at the highest quality. Unfortunately, on the Vivo X100 Ultra, we can only take RAW photos at 1x zoom. RAW literally means unprocessed photos, straight out of the camera. These shots have a much wider dynamic range than regular photos. Because of this, we can edit them without losing quality, bring out the shadows, and tone down the highlights. But of course, a lot still depends on the quality of the original shot itself. By the way, the iPhone can shoot in RAW on all lenses and focal lengths. But the Vivo can only take such photos with the main camera and the telephoto lens. We're testing macro photography, and here the quality at all zoom levels turned out to be more or less the same. From the zoom perspective, the iPhone's maximum zoom in photo mode is 25 times, which, of course, isn't very much. Meanwhile, with the Vivo X100 Ultra, in photo mode, you get a zoom of 100 times. If you point it at the menu, this is what you get. So here's the QR code, and everything is perfectly readable. On the Vivo X100 Ultra, the shooting is just unreal. This is 100x. Let's compare the quality and zoom range in photo mode. With the ultra-wide lens, there's no visible difference, even in the details. Both photos are extremely similar. One-time zoom, the main camera on the iPhone is 24 megapixels, and on the Vivo, it's 12 megapixels. But the 15 Pro Max doesn't have any advantage because of that. The quality is the same again. 2x zoom, the X2 Ultra produced a slightly sharper image. 3x zoom on the iPhone, and on the Vivo, the telephoto lens is 3.7x. Again, the result from the Vivo is sharper and of higher quality. And it's exactly the same story at 5 times zoom, even though the iPhone is using its optical lens here. 10 times zoom. On both smartphones, the text is readable, but the Vivo photo is once again sharper, more detailed, and less noisy. 20 times zoom. Here, even to the naked eye, you can see the advantage of the X2 Ultra. The photo is sharper, there's no visible noise at all, which can't be said about the iPhone. At 25 times zoom, the situation doesn't change. And once again, the Chinese competitor beats the 15 Pro Max. With the Vivo, we can zoom in even further. Let's switch to 60 times zoom. And here, both at this level and at 100 times zoom, the sharpness and quality of the photo are clearly better on the X2 Ultra. And just to be sure, let's zoom in on some smaller text. And here, starting from the telephoto lens all the way to maximum zoom, the X2 Ultra performs better than the iPhone. Now let's compare the quality of 50 and 200 megapixels on the Vivo and 48 megapixels on the iPhone. On the latter, 48 megapixels are only available on the main lens and only at 1 times zoom. At the same time, the X2 Ultra doesn't have any advantage when it comes to the ultra-wide lens. On the contrary, its sharpness is actually lower than that of its competitor. The 48 megapixels on the iPhone's main camera also look better than the 50 megapixels on the Vivo. I switched to the 3.7x telephoto lens on it, and on the iPhone I set it to about 5x for a similar close-up. Here, the 50 megapixels look a bit better. The text is sharper and the details are better preserved. But the 200 megapixel photo doesn't seem to offer any advantage at all. Strange. Let's evaluate how the cameras perform in photo mode when there's not enough light. The iPhone has a more contrasty and better-looking background, but the face isn't very sharp, almost like it's out of focus. And the skin looks kind of yellowish. With the Vivo, the background is brighter, but my face is sharper and the skin looks more natural. The contrast is higher. If you're shooting everything around you, the iPhone does a better job here. The photo is more contrasty, the sky isn't overexposed, it's darker and looks more like night. Plus, Vivo handles lighting worse. You can see strong glare from the building. The first photo is from the main camera. Here, I actually prefer the Vivo. Both the details, the way it handles light sources, and the greenery all look better on it. The photos are more vibrant and have higher contrast. In the other shots, you don't really see this difference anymore. Well, overall, I like all the photos from both smartphones. We came to Moscow City to take some awesome portraits. Right here is just an amazing view. The very best view of Moscow City is right here. It's really dark here, and there's literally just this one small streetlight lighting us up. And that's it, there's no other light here. Well, the rest of the light is really far away. And what's really nice about Vivo is that when we turn on portrait mode, my face gets lit up really well right away. This is what it looks like. But honestly, the little light is really cool, and when I take a photo, I give a high five and we snap the picture. Everything's awesome. There you go. The iPhone, on the other hand, works differently. So, the iPhone works like this. When we press the button, the flashlight turns on at that moment. And only then does it take the photo. The selfies from both smartphones turned out pretty mediocre. The iPhone has a lot of noise and weak detail, but at least the background looks decent almost everywhere. The Vivo does a better job with the face and foreground overall, but the background always ends up very overexposed. Selfies in portrait mode are definitely better on the Vivo, but serious issues with the blur boundary ruin the overall impression. It looks especially bad when there's more than one person in the frame. The iPhone doesn't have such obvious flaws, but the quality of these photos is really disappointing. The portrait photo taken with the main camera looks much better than the one from the front camera. Both shots look great. The next photo turned out better on the Vivo. On the iPhone, the skin looks yellowish and quite pale again. The last shot tells a similar story. Nighttime RAW shots are significantly better than regular photos on both smartphones. We increased the contrast, reduced highlights and noise, and made the sky darker and more natural. Testing the zoom in low light conditions. Visually, thanks to the contrast and saturation, the ultra-wide photos look better on the Vivo, but in terms of detail, there's no difference here. Main camera, 1x zoom. The X100 Ultra handled artificial lighting better, but again, the photo quality is more or less the same. 2x zoom, and here too, both smartphones deliver similar photo quality. 3x zoom on the 15 Pro Max and 3.7x on the X100 Ultra. On the iPhone, the signs are overexposed and unreadable, and it also has more noise. Once again, Vivo did a great job. At 5x zoom, the iPhone once again struggles with light sources. The signs are overexposed, details and text are lost. Vivo definitely handled it better. 10x zoom. The X100 Ultra once again delivers a higher quality and more detailed result. We can even read the small text. But on the 15 Pro Max, it all turns into a blur. And the photo from it is also very noisy. 25x is the maximum zoom for the iPhone, 20x for the Vivo. Here, even without zooming in, you can see how much better the camera on the latter works. Its sign is sharper and there's less noise. With the X100 Ultra, we can zoom in even further. I'm setting it to 30 times zoom. Even at this level, its photo turns out pretty well, although the algorithms suppress noise a bit too much, smoothing out a lot of details. And we still have 60 times zoom, and even 100 times zoom. And even in low light, I can reach that tiny inscription in the distance and read it. That's really cool. Let's check the photo quality, 50 megapixels on the Vivo and 48 megapixels on the iPhone. From the main camera, the result is clearly better on the latter. But with the X100 Ultra, it actually seems like things have only gotten worse. And it's the same at all focal lengths. 50 megapixels didn't give any advantage at all, and in fact, the image quality actually got worse. 200 megapixel photos on the Vivo are only available with the telephoto lens. And here, yes, the result is better than on the iPhone. But if you compare the same photo from the Vivo at 12 megapixels versus 200, there's no difference in detail at all. Vivo really spoils us with a huge number of awesome modes. On the iPhone, shooting, especially night mode, works a little differently. For that, we need to switch to photo mode. Here, a little menu pops up. Now we tap this thing, the one at the bottom, and select the shutter speed we need. Right now, the shutter speed is set to auto, but if we want to take a beautiful shot with blurred headlights, we need to set it to at least 3 seconds. So, we take a shot like this, and now let's try it out and see what we get. Vivo has an awesome mode called long exposure. With just one tap, you get unbelievably beautiful photos. It's these little things that make up the Vivo user experience. You always have all the modes at your fingertips, and it's easy to turn them on and adjust them. You don't have to come up with any tricks or install extra apps to get great photos. If you know how to get the same results on an iPhone, let us know in the comments. We read everything. And this is what the night mode looks like on the iPhone and the Vivo X100 Ultra. And honestly, on the Vivo, it's just out of this world. On the iPhone, it's just a mode with a 3-second long exposure. What can I say about astrophotography itself? It works great on Vivo. And as a parent, I especially love the constellation feature. You point the camera at the sky and explore space together with your kids. In this regard, the iPhone doesn't even come close to giving you the same feelings. Although, to be fair, its night sky photos also turn out pretty good. I also tested taking photos of the moon. And of course, Vivo delivers results here that the iPhone just can't match. The quality of the iPhone shots is far behind its competitor at every zoom level. And it's not just the moon. Both the sky and photos in general look way cooler on the X100 Ultra. Another advantage of Vivo is its longer range zoom in this mode. We're testing PWM. The Vivo has a 6.78-inch AMOLED display, while the iPhone has a 6.7-inch OLED display, both with 120Hz refresh rates. We're measuring the PWM coefficient on both smartphones at brightness levels of 100%, 50%, and 20%. Both smartphones are mostly on par with each other and stay within the comfortable range for the eyes. Only at minimum brightness did the iPhone's PWM become twice as high as the Vivo's. But with the Vivo, you have the option to enable full pulse width modulation. The result is clear. However, at 20% brightness, it actually got worse. The iPhone uses its own Apple A17 Pro processor, while the Vivo has a Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. In most tests, both show results that are neck and neck. But here's what we got. We're running the test in Antutu. The iPhone finished the measurement first, but its result turned out to be much weaker than the Vivo's. However, as I mentioned in previous videos, Chinese manufacturers aren't above manipulating benchmark results and often optimize their hardware just to get impressive numbers in these tests. In real-world use, though, I didn't notice any difference in the speed of the smartphones. I also measured the smartphone's Wi-Fi speeds. The iPhone was being stubborn for a while and ended up showing a weaker result than the Vivo. However, considering that I have excellent 300 megabits per second internet and a good router, both results are rather weak. As you requested, I also measured the network speed using SIM cards. There's no significant difference here. The Vivo is a bit faster for downloads, while the iPhone is faster for uploads. The Vivo has a good battery with 5,500 mAh. The iPhone only has 4,441 mAh. That's why the result is like this. Well, friends, We just finished a whole day of shooting. On the iPhone 15 Pro Max, we have 17% battery left, and on the Vivo X100 Ultra, 28%. These smartphones are absolutely brand new. That is, the Vivo was bought about a month ago, and the iPhone also about a month ago. But we started filming on the iPhone when it was at 98% and on the Vivo at 100%. So, there's still a difference of 9 to 10%, which is actually quite a lot. Well, friends, let's sum things up and talk about what makes the iPhone better than the Vivo. And first of all, it's definitely the software, because this Vivo X100 Ultra smartphone is made for the Chinese market, while the iPhone 15 Pro Max is, by default, made for the global market. Of course, the software here works just beautifully. Meanwhile, for the Vivo X100 Ultra, we'll definitely make a video soon on how to remove all the Chinese software from this Vivo X100 Ultra smartphone. That way, you can turn this smartphone into as global a version as possible.
Friends, if this video already came out on our channel, we'll definitely link it in the description.
Be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss that video. This is especially for those who want to fully switch to this Chinese Vivo X100 Ultra smartphone but are worried about running into all sorts of problems. Let's talk about video recording. At what point would I choose the iPhone 15 Pro Max? What does it have that the competitors don't? First, it's the ability to shoot cinematic video with any lens, whether it's the front camera or the main camera module, in 4K at 30 frames per second, with stunning background blur. The iPhone handles stabilization very confidently. On Android smartphones, including the Vivo X100 Ultra, there are some minor jitters. Well, most likely, this is just a bit of an issue with the stabilization in cinematic mode not being fully refined here, and unfortunately, the Samsung S24 Ultra simply drops frames. A significant advantage of the iPhone that I'd like to point out here is the ability to shoot in log, HDR, and ProRes RAW from any lens and at any focal length. For those who are professional videographers and know how to color grade video, the iPhone 15 Pro Max is definitely more interesting because it can shoot at all focal lengths, even with the ultra-wide lens, in log and in HDR. However, these files are really large. Meanwhile, the Vivo X100 Ultra can only shoot in log at 1x and 2x, meaning literally just on the main lens. The iPhone has a very good front-facing camera, and in this test, it performed better. Also, thanks to the fact that the iPhone 15 Pro Max has one of the best main cameras on the market, you can take really awesome macro shots, both in video and in photos. And overall, taking macro shots on the iPhone 15 Pro Max was really convenient for me, while on the Vivo X100 Ultra, it switches to the 3.7x telephoto lens with 200 megapixels. But even so, I couldn't zoom in a way that made the macro image look better than what the iPhone produced. The iPhone 15 Pro Max can only shoot slow-motion video in Full HD at 120 frames per second, while the Vivo X100 Ultra can do it in 4K at 120 frames per second. The Vivo X100 Ultra also has 8K recording, and the quality is amazing. And in our tests, when we compared 8K to 4K on the main lens, the image from the Vivo was more detailed, and you could easily zoom in 2 times and still get a better result than what the iPhone 15 Pro Max delivers. I also really liked the main camera module. For example, when we were shooting in low-light mode, the stabilization on the Vivo worked better than what the iPhone could do. As for audio recording on these smartphones, I definitely preferred the sound recording on the Vivo, especially when there's a strong wind, the noise reduction kicks in right away. Audio recording is not the iPhone's strong suit. Very often, wind blows directly into the microphone and creates an unpleasant noise in the video. Now let's move on to photography. On the iPhone, you can shoot RAW photos even with the ultra-wide lens, whereas on the Vivo X100 Ultra, RAW only works starting from the main lens and up to the telephoto lens, which, of course, isn't very convenient. But that's where the iPhone's advantages in photo mode end, and honestly, when it comes to photography, in my opinion, the best camera phone on the market right now is definitely the Vivo X100 Ultra. In photo mode, Vivo leaves the iPhone with no chance. The photo quality is excellent, and the zoom is significantly better and higher quality. The variety of modes is unreal, they're easy to use, there are tutorials and cool features. In this regard, the X100 Ultra is simply number one. Portrait modes, astrophotography shots, landscapes, without a doubt. You can take unbelievably cool photos with this smartphone. And at the same time, the smartphone will teach you how to do it, since it has a huge number of tutorials. For people who are just starting out in photography, the Vivo X100 Ultra is the best choice. In terms of convenience when working with the default camera app on these smartphones, I would definitely choose the Vivo X100 Ultra. It's super convenient, very intuitive, and everything is immediately clear.
I'd also like to point out that Vivo is the best phone for women. My wife Anya now constantly uses it to take photos for social media.
Before, when she used the iPhone 15 Pro Max and took some photos, she would then edit those photos in Photoshop. And that took a lot of time. The photos come out well edited and retouched right on the smartphone, and Vivo's algorithms can even apply makeup. It saves a ton of time, and you can basically forget about post-processing in Photoshop. It's just perfect for social media. So in this regard, you should definitely consider this smartphone for purchase. Maybe even as a second phone, because right now my wife wants to take this phone from me and use it actively. She wants to leave her iPhone 15 Pro Max at home.
When it comes to drawbacks of the X100 Ultra, we already discussed them in detail in 2 videos about this smartphone.
In the big battle against the Samsung S24 Ultra and in a separate short video about the new model itself. Both videos turned out to be interesting and useful. The links will be in the description. To sum it up briefly, the iPhone 15 Pro Max is a camera phone for advanced users who care about high-quality video recording and the ability to shoot in ProRes RAW, log formats, and HDR at any focal length. Vivo, on the other hand, is an extremely user-friendly camera phone with amazing photo capabilities that will save you a ton of time. You'll get great results right away without needing any post-processing, whether it's a portrait, selfie, or landscape. Which smartphone would I personally recommend buying? And that's definitely the Vivo X100 Ultra. Right now, I think it's the best camera phone on the market. Yes, the only issue is that it's the Chinese version. And to properly set up the smartphone and transfer all the apps you've been using, you'll have to spend quite a bit of time. But in every other aspect, this is the best camera phone we've tested throughout all of 2024. However, very soon we'll see the new iPhone 16, which I will definitely put through a full test. No doubt about it. And then we'll see who comes out on top in 2024. So make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the biggest and most detailed camera test of the upcoming new release. Let us know in the comments which smartphone you would choose. And that's it, bye bye everyone.